We've got a whole bunch of new varieties of tomatoes we're growing this year, and I'm going to tell you why. Guten Yardening, everybody! If I had to pick a vegetable that I enjoy growing based on the nutritional value, the taste, and the pleasure of bringing it up out of the ground, well, my go-to would be sweet potatoes for sure. But if I had to pick a vegetable that I just thoroughly enjoyed tasting fresh off the vine and that had probably more uses than just about any other vegetable, well, that would be our tomato. And I want to talk to you just briefly about our tomato experience, or our typical tomato experience here at Guten Yardening, because in years past, we've primarily focused our tomato growing on cherry tomatoes, the smaller tomatoes, red, yellow, black, you name it. We've probably grown a variety of cherry tomato that's just like what you're thinking. But the thing is, those cherry tomatoes, while they preserve well frozen, and we've done that, and they're absolutely phenomenal when it comes to taste. Again, fresh taste of a cherry tomato. I call it garden candy because that's what it is to me. Well, while that's enjoyable, one thing that we're lacking in are those larger tomatoes that we could use for canning or for other purposes beyond just freezing. And so this year, one of our focuses is going to be on expanding out our varieties of tomatoes to incorporate a lot more of the larger tomatoes. And part of the decision behind this is that we've talked about this goal of vegetable self-sufficiency, growing enough vegetables that we don't have to purchase any from the store. And we've done that in large part, except that we're still having to purchase some processed food when it comes to things like spaghetti sauces or tomato sauces or salsas. And so that's really kind of defeating the purpose of what we're trying to do. So what this means for us is that we have plenty of seeds saved from years past from our cherry tomato varieties, but what we don't have any of these larger varieties, or very few anyway, of these larger varieties. And so what we did was to go out and purchase on clearance a bunch of different varieties of tomato seeds. Now I'm going to show you a couple of the different varieties here, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why for some of these varieties, like why specifically we chose these, and because there are a couple of different reasons. Now I think for many people it's highly possible that when it comes to choosing tomatoes, you choose what's available at the local greenhouse, or you find some seeds and you're not really overly particular in that selection process. But there are a few things that you should look out for, and a few things that it makes sense to look out for, especially if you have limited space or a limited growing season. So I'm going to show you some of the varieties right now that we're going to be growing, and I'm going to talk you through some of the resources that are there in order to make the best choice for your given space. We'll take a look at all these different varieties. I mean, the pictures alone, look at these, are enough to get us excited about this upcoming growing season. And we have these in addition to the ones that we've harvested, in addition to the ones that some of our community members have given us. And so this is really a cornucopia, I guess you could say, of tomato seeds. But I want to walk you through some of these different varieties because there is a rationale here with all of these. It's not just picking the ones that look pretty. There are different tastes, there are different timelines, and there are different types. Now when you look at something like this variety, for example, this is a determinate tomato. What does that mean? Well, a determinate tomato is not going to grow as tall. You don't need as much space. So well, you can actually see it right here on the back. This one is supposed to be container friendly. So we have determinate varieties of tomatoes available to us so that we can grow them in smaller spaces. So when you're picking tomatoes, one of the things to really keep in mind is how much space you have. You know, some of these tomatoes can grow 8 to 10 feet tall if you let them, if you don't cut them back. They can really spread out. But a determinate tomato might work well for you if you're growing in a container space. And along those same lines, we picked these varieties of tomatoes because each of these, we have a Sheboygan tomato, a Wisconsin 55, and this is the Amana tomato. But these are grown fairly locally or developed locally here in the Midwest. These two varieties are Wisconsin varieties, and this one's out of Iowa. So we know that these are varieties that should grow well in our area. So that's something else to consider as you're picking tomato seeds. You want to pick varieties that can grow well in your area. With all of these varieties, though, what we're looking at is to try to find the ones that taste the best, that have the most use for us, and that also grow well in our area. So some of these varieties might not work out for us. I mean, that's a possibility. But if you have varieties that are meant for your area, that's a big bonus. That's kind of an indicator that you should do pretty well. But also providing these different varieties means that we'll be able to see which ones we want to continue growing in the future. Now, a couple of these varieties, and I'll just pull these up here. We have the Pink Oxheart and the New Yorker tomatoes. These are actually shorter term varieties. So this one, the Pink Oxheart, is supposed to grow to maturity within 55 days. And the New Yorker is a 65-day tomato, whereas most of the rest of these are about 3 months, somewhere between 85 to 95 days. And so having a couple varieties that mature earlier in the season is also a good reason to vary the tomato seeds that you're choosing. If you have some varieties that give you that harvest earlier, we have another variety that's a 42-day variety. I don't have it here, but these varieties that give you a result, a harvest sooner, means that you can spread out the harvesting of your tomato season. So another good thing to look out for. Now, I mentioned earlier that we want larger tomatoes this season, and with the exception of these two varieties, everything else here is a bit larger. In fact, these Kellogg's breakfast tomatoes, and they're not called that because, according to the back, they're not called that because they're related in any way to the Kellogg's cereal, but these are supposed to be 2 pounds plus. In fact, if we take a look at the back of this Kellogg's variety, you can see that it tells you some of the common uses for this based on its flavor. And it says delicious sliced, juiced, canned, or cut fresh for salads. So this is a tomato that's going to serve us for all the purposes that we're looking for. And a lot of these others have the same basic idea. But the other thing we're looking for here is taste. And so a variety of tastes is something that having a variety of seeds will get you. Some of our tomatoes are going to be on the more acidic side. Some of them will be sweeter. And that's one of the things that you can also look for when it comes to your tomatoes. This is an evergreen tomato. Well, take a look at these. I'll pull a couple of these up close. We have some beautiful differences here in color. I mean, take a look at these three different ones. We have our Brandywine black tomato, our wine tomato, which I think is absolutely stunning looking. Look at those colors and textures. And then this evergreen tomato. Each of these has not just a different purpose. Some of these, like this one, this is an all-purpose variety. This one is supposed to be great for salsas, for sauces, and for cooking. And they say that this one is great on salads and sliced. So I think, and I hope what you're getting across here from what I'm talking about is that there are many reasons to pick a large variety. There are many reasons to pick specific varieties for your garden and for your space. And not just limit yourself to what's in the greenhouse. Yes, that's simple and you'll probably get good results, but you want to make sure they're the results that you want. And yes, we are still going to be growing cherry tomatoes. In addition to the ones that we have seeds for already from here, we're trying a couple new varieties as well. We always like to look and see which ones are going to grow best, and we like that uniqueness. But as I commented on a live stream that Hickory Croft Farm was doing recently, I mean, it's always fun to experiment around, but we have to have that baseline of production when our goal is self-sufficiency, when our goal is providing ourselves with all the food that we possibly need. And one additional thought here at Guten Yardening, we do collect a lot of our own seeds from the vegetables that we grow. But we don't always have every variety. We don't always get seeds from every variety. And sometimes we want to try some new to us varieties. So one piece of advice here would be to be on the lookout for discounted seeds. We got all of these seeds from MIGardener from the clearance section, and they were $2 a piece for each of these seeds. Now that's a 50%, basically a 50% off price tag for some new varieties to us, some really cool varieties of seeds. And so that's something to be on the lookout for, especially at the end of gardening seasons. That's when we found some of our best deals with seeds. So if that's something you're looking for, keep an eye out online, keep an eye out in your stores as well. And you could end up with a ton more seeds, a lot of different varieties, unique varieties, for a low cost. There are so many decisions that we make constantly when gardening, and sometimes we give a lot of forethought to them, and sometimes we just sort of let them pass by. But when it comes to the need for how you use a vegetable, Our opinion is that you should give some forethought into the end product and how useful it's going to be for what your family loves. We pick varieties of vegetables that we know we're going to eat, but also we want to make sure that we're getting good production that has an end product that reduces our dependency on the grocery store. Oh, and I want to show you one more thing here. You know, we get a lot of these seed catalogs coming in. This one's from Vermont Bean Seed Companies, and they actually have some pretty good and useful information from our point of view as well. This one, for example, talks a little bit about tomatoes and how to get them started. It talks about the amount of time you need, temperatures, and it also tells you when to transplant. So there's some pretty valuable information in these catalogs. And I know if you're like us, sometimes you get overwhelmed with the number of catalogs that you get coming in. But especially if you're new to growing tomatoes, this is something for you to consider. There's useful information in here. And on top of that, they give you a nice description of the different varieties of tomatoes that they offer as well. So always be on the lookout for additional information. First and foremost, experience is the best way to determine if something's going to work for you. But finding reputable sources for information and instruction is also highly beneficial when it comes to growing plants like our tomatoes. Well, one thing we'd love for you to do today is to leave us a comment down below and let us know some of the varieties of tomatoes that you absolutely love growing. Let us know what you're planting this season when it comes to tomatoes. And go ahead and check out our video on what seeds you should be starting in March, at least here for Zone 5. I'll put a link to that video in the description. And on top of that, we have a couple of other videos on germination as well. So there's tons of content here for you to check out that will help you. And again, we encourage you, take your time, get out there, find some good varieties that work well in your area that serve the purpose you want. When all is said and done, you go out there and enjoy some of that garden candy. Well, if you enjoyed this video today, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.